wanted to read a couple of paragraphs about the spirit of evil, the spirit of jealousy, hatred, temptation, etc. When I say spirit, I'm talking about lowercase spirit. Lowercase spirit is temporal. It has a beginning and an end in time. If it was uppercase spirit, then it was transcendent and universal. But we have to write it down this way. And every time I come across this spirit, soul, or man in lowercase, I will note because there's a lack of words in this vocabulary to talk about the universal, the transcendent, you see. So we kind of have to use these techniques. As well, allegory, metaphor are used a lot, you know. Some say ancient dead languages like Pali, ancient Egyptian, ancient Greek was a more metaphysical languages, yes, more refined languages to talk about God and the transcendent and all of those things. But they're, gone. There's almost nobody left that knows these languages. It was called the languages of the angels, you know. I suppose they are going to make a comeback one of these days. Perhaps a new language, even more refined. Who knows? So I'm just going to read and I will try to explain as I go along. For anyone who holds that God made the world, the question, why did he permit the existence in it of any evil, or that of the evil one in whom all evil is personified, is altogether meaningless. One might as well inquire why he did not make a world without dimensions or one without temporal succession. Our whole metaphysical tradition, Christian and other, maintains that there are two in us, this man with a lower case and the man with an uppercase in this man with a lower case. There are two in us, a transcendent and a temporal. And that this is so is still part and parcel of our spoken languages, in which, for example, the expression self control implies that there is one that controls and another subject to control. For we know that nothing acts upon itself, though we forget it when we talk about self government. Of these two selves, the outer man and the inner man, the psychophysical, the so called personality, and very person, the human compositive of body, soul, and spirit, is built up of these two, on the one hand, body and soul, and on the other, spirit. One is mutable and mortal, and the other constant and immortal. One becomes, the other just is, and the existence of the one that is not, but becomes, is precisely a personification or a postulation, since we cannot say of anything that never remains the same that it is. and whoever necessary and however necessary it may be, to say I and mine for the practical purposes of everyday life, our ego, in fact, is nothing but a name for what it really is, only a sequence of observed behaviors. Observed behaviors is what psychology studies, you know. Psychology only studies the ego. Never they want to study the I with the upper cap, you know, the real I, the transcendent I, the immortal I. They don't want to go there. In modern science, if you mentioned transcendence, if you God, if you anything like that, soul, anything, you will get immediately excluded. There was this scientist, very brilliant, top of his class, and he was saying, you know, in my exams, I was a top of the class student, and I made the mistake of mentioning God in one of these tests. They immediately, cut half of my score points, just because I mentioned God. They immediately, no, we don't want that here. Anyway, body, soul, and spirit. Can one or other of these be equated with the devil? Well, not the body, certainly, for the body in itself is neither good nor evil, but only an instrument of means to good or evil, nor the spirit with the all caps, with the upper spirit, intellect, synthesis, consciousness. The Greeks called it the Agathos Daimon, for this is, by hypothesis, man's best and most divine part, in itself incapable of error, and our only means of participation in the life and the perfection that God is Himself. There remains only this soul with lower caps, that soul which all must hate, quote unquote, hate, who would be Christ's disciples, and which, as Saint Paul reminds us, the Word of God is like a two-edged sword that, quote, severs from the spirit, a soul which Saint Paul must have lost to be able to say truly that I live, yet not I, but Christ in me, enunciating like Mansur his own theosis. You see, way back when, if you wanted to become a disciple, you had to forsake the ego. You had to let go of the ego. Hmm? What is the ego? Envy, hatred, jealousy. That's the ego. The tempter in the desert. That's the ego, you know, which they equate with evil or El Satan, you know. Of the two in us, one the spark of intellect or spirit with uppercase, the intellect with uppercase, the spirit with uppercase, and the other feeling or mentality, feelings, mentalities, opinions. I think of this, I think of that, subject to persuasion. You put some ads on the television with some half naked chicks. You are easily persuaded. It is obvious that the latter is the tempter, or more truly, the temptress. Now we're going into some muddy waters. People are going to start pulling their hairs. What do you mean by temperance? Temptress. There is in each of us, in this man and in that woman alike, an anima and an animus, relatively feminine and masculine. And Adam rightly said, the woman gave, and I did eat. Also, be it noted, the serpent by whom the woman herself was first beguiled wears in art a woman's face. But to avoid all possibility of misunderstandings here, it must be emphasized that all this has nothing to do whatsoever with a supposed inferiority of women or superiority of men. In this functional and psychological sense, any given woman may be manly and heroic, or any given man may be effeminate and coward. Okay? Very important. One knows, of course, that the soul with low caps, like the self in low caps, is an ambiguous term, and that in some contexts it may denote the spirit with the big caps, the spirit, or soul in all caps of the soul in low caps. There's a soul with a big S that controls the other soul with a small s. There are two in us, one that controls, and the other is the one who is controlled. What he's trying to say is, you have to control the little self that is composed of feelings, emotions, thoughts, subject to persuasions. He's talking about discipline. You have to, like a horse, train him and control him. Nowadays, we see a lot of people that are having a fit for almost anything because they have absolutely no control over their egos, no control of themselves. They are lost in the excesses of the world. You know, they have no self control, no self governance, or the self with a big S of the self with a small s, both of which are expressions in common use. But we are speaking here of the mutable soul with a small s, which is mutable, that becomes, so in constant change. The small soul, the ego, is in constant change. We can't say that it is. No, we can't, because it's what? In constant change. It just becomes, and it has a beginning and an end in time. As distinguished from the spirit, and should not be overlooked to what extent this nefesh, well, nefesh is an expression from the Levant, I suppose. Nefesh means soul, body, and spirit. It's the Trinity of soul, body, and spirit. The anima, after which the human and other animals are so called, is constantly disparaged in the Bible. The anima, he's talking about the temporal self, he's talking about the ego, the anima, is in constant change, and it's constantly disparaged in the Bible, as is the corresponding nafs in Islam. So the nafs is the ego in Islam. This soul with a small s is the self to be denied. The Greek original meaning utterly reject with ontological rather than a merely ethical application. See, everything we get in the Levant, about this doctrine comes from the ancient Greeks, you know. Everything, all the mystics of ancient times was Greek. Yes, all the original Christians and whatnot, and Gnostics, and they were all Greeks, Stoics, and whatever. Of course, then the translation from Greek to Arabic or whatever other language, a lot got lost in translation, I bet. Anyway, the soul that must be lost, if is to be saved, and which, as Maester Eckhart and the Sufis so often say, must put itself to death, or as the Hindus and the Buddhists say, must be conquered or tamed, for that is not myself. You see, he's talking about learn to distinguish between the transcendent immortal self and the ego. You are not the same. One exists and it's in constantly mutation, it's constantly becoming, because the ego is something that helps you, navigate the world. Yes, it has a beginning when you are born, and it goes away, disappears when you pass away. The ego adapts to the ages, it helps you go along. Sometimes it goes extremely bad. Sometimes it might be good. There's, you know, malleability of this is not fixed. What I was thinking is that nothing is really rigid. Nothing is really like in an assembly line. Everything is random. Yes. So science, for instance, nowadays they think everything comes aligned in sequence. Everything is sequential, and if it's not sequential, then it's not science. No, sorry, you are completely wrong, because everything, that's the principle of free will, is that everything is random, man. You can't. Uh, they're obsessed actually with predicting the future. That's why they are focused on everything is a sequence. No, it's not. Everything is random. They are obsessed with predicting the future. It's people in charge. They want to dominate, and predicting the future is one of the ways. So anyway, they think they're going to be better than anybody else. It's a rotten, philosophy. They still, all their science is about predicting the future. And then there you have these, snake oils people that will, oh, I can predict the future using the, I don't know, the tarot, or the astrology. I can predict the future. They are just grifters, and that's why it's so has such a bad reputation. These schools, because there's always grifters who will try to predict the future using it. Oh, there will be a lot of rich people. Oh, I want a piece of that. I want to know, the future so I can better, rule and control. That's the spirit of the ego. He wants to dominate and. Anyway, sorry about this. Uh, the what's it called? The side, the side thing. This soul with a small s is subject to persuasion and distracted by its likes and dislikes. Oh, I like this, I dislike that. This is my opinion. See, it's the soul with a small s is not doesn't care about facts, logic, or wisdom. It just cares about the bullshit. It's very subject to persuasion. This quote unquote mind with a small m that we mean when we speak of having been minded to do this or that is that which you callest I or myself. You see, people mistaken the ego for the self sometimes, and which Jakob Böhme thus distinguishes from the I that is. There is the I that becomes and the I that is. The I that becomes is the ego, the I that is the transcendent. When he says, with reference to his own illuminations, that not I, the I that I am, knows these things, but God in me. He's trying to make the distinction between the I and the God, the temporal with the transcendent. We cannot treat the doctrine of the ego at length, but we'll only say that, as for Maester Eckhart and the Sufis, ego, the word I, is proper to none but God in his sameness, and that I can only rightly be attributed to him and to the one who, being joined into the Lord in one spirit. You see, when you say I, you always should be trying to mention the immortal transcendent self. Always. But people don't seem to make that distinction. They always, oh, I believe this, I have the opinion, I blah, 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 blah. He's talking about the ego. I have a car, I have money. That's the ego talking. Who are you? There comes the eternal question. Who art thou? And they're like, my name is so and so. I have this age. I have this car. That's the ego. That's temporal. That's not you. But people mistaken both. That the soul herself, or I, or self itself, should be the devil, who we call the enemy, the adversary, the tempter, the dragon, never by a personal name, may seem startling, but it is very far from being a novel proposition. He's trying to say that this personality, this ego, subject to persuasion and to all the vices and addictions of the world, is actually the adversary, El Satan, the devil, the dragon, the tempter. As we go on, it will be found that an equation with soul, with Satan, has often been enunciated, and that it provides us with an almost perfect solution to all the problems in the latter's personality poses. Both are real enough for all pragmatic purposes here. In the active life where evil must be contempted with, and the dualism of the contraries cannot be evaded, but they are no more principles, for more really real than the darkness that is nothing but the privation of light. He's trying to make a distinction here between light and darkness. Darkness exists, or evil exists, because it's just a privation of light. Evil, or El Satan, or whatever, is not a thing. It's not a person. It's not a place. It exists because it's just a privation of light. Analogously speaking, imagine you're facing the sun. The sun is hitting your face. The body is is being hit by the sunlight. If you look behind, there's a shadow being cast. That's evil, analogously speaking. So light hits the body. The absence of light creates a shadow. And analogously speaking, that is evil. It's not a thing in itself. It has attributes, but it doesn't have principles. So you have the sun, which is the spirit, the body, which is being hit by the sun, and then you have the little soul with a small s. So spirit, body, and soul, small soul with a small s. Do not mistaken, the terms. The three, you see. No one will deny that the battleground which the psychomachy must be fought out to finish is within you, or what where Christ fights. We also Christ also fights, there also must be his enemy, the Antichrist, be found. Neither will anyone, superstition apart, be likely to pretend that the temptations of Saint Anthony, as depicted in art, can be regarded otherwise as projections. Projections. People project evil. Evil projects itself. That's how evil spreads. Evil projects itself into other people's to infect them, quote unquote, as projections of interior tensions. When people are so stressed, they want to make you stressed as well. That's what he's talking about. Projections of interior tensions. In the same way that Picasso Guernica is the mirror of Europe's disintegrated soul. Yes, the soul of Europe was destroyed through the First World War. Yes, it was destroyed. The hell of modern science, the devil's horns, and sting are an image of the most evil beast, man himself. I am reading way too much. I mean, it's been 26 minutes. I think I'm going to stop here. Where is. Where is. Hmm, that part about the daemon and the daemon? See, in Greek, they called it. Um, blah, 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 blah. I don't know where it is. The Greeks made a distinction. There was the Agathon daemon and the kakos daemon. The Agathon daemon was the spirit, the immortal, the transcendent. The kakos daemon was the ego. Okay. So I think I'm going to shut up. Have a nice day.